All right, guys. Real quick, so current events, we got Kate, Ariel. Yep. How we doing?
Didn't start yet.
What? What about you, Ariel? No? Oh my God. Well, you got some time. If you guys need any help, let me know. Make sure you talk to one another. We have the same event. All right? Cool. Cool. All right, guys. So we are starting this new chapter. Okay, yesterday again, I wanted to focus on Veterans Day. I think it's important that we do that, not just on Veterans Day, but every day. Thank a veteran. So I posted the video lesson yesterday to the module. So you'll see that. I know it wasn't for Veterans Day on Monday. We didn't have school, but I wanted to make sure I talked about it. So you can find out all that information that we discussed yesterday and a little bit more on the video lesson for yesterday. So anyway, we're going to move on here. We're going to talk about the age of absolutism. Did I give you guys the terms yesterday? Did I? All right. Does anybody need a little bit more time with it? No? We good? All right. Okay. I'm going to start off here with a bell ringer. I'm going to put that up and we can see this transition point from last chapter to this. All right. Again, last chapter is pretty big. I understand that, but there's a lot of topics to discover, to talk about in that point. All right. So here you go. Explain what the terms absolutism and divine right means. So these are two important terms that you need to know moving forward. Again, this first topic of this chapter is the age of absolutism. All right. And then anyway, detail about how divine right fits in with it. Okay. And finally here, then your response, how could monarchs of the time claim and hold on to this power / wealth? So think about those two terms, right? Think about too, how these monarchs became so wealthy. All right, think about last chapter, last topic of what we talked about, which is really opening up the marketplaces for these European countries. There you go. Yep. Why wouldn't you bring it? Fill up pass. What's up? Are you kidding me? Did you fill out a pass? Hurry up, hurry up. Picture day. Oh, did you miss it the first time around or what? Is that when you were sick? On whose boat? Gotcha. All right, guys. So absolutism, this term, you guys should have looked this up yesterday when we were going over vocab. What does absolutism mean? Well, yeah. Luna, go ahead. Yeah, good job, right? So with this chapter here, we're going to talk about many of these monarchs, these kings, and we did talk a little bit about Henry VIII last chapter. He's a good example of an absolute monarch that held on to full power, absolute power. There's no checks and balances, right? Even though England had a parliament, it didn't really much matter. They were in fear of Henry VIII. So when it comes to this absolute power, this monarch held on to everything. Right? There's really no parliament or legislative branch here to hold the king in check. So even though England had that, it wasn't perfect yet. Right? We'll talk about this transition here more when we get to the English Civil War. Another Civil War in England? Yeah, man. Okay. Anyway, with this age of absolutism, again, I thought it kind of hit perfect on what we were mentioning yesterday with Veterans Day. All right, why are military so large? Why is it so big? Why do we have so much funding to it? Everybody asks that question every year. But it's important to know our values, our rights, our freedoms, our liberties are protected. And we don't fall into an age of absolutism like this ever again. Right? There's always that fear, that risk that could happen, where government just becomes too strong. And our foundations of our government are limited, should be, and should always be in check. And there's reasons why we have checks and balances. There's reason why we have separation of powers. So that we don't fall into a time period like this. Right. So yeah, what we're going to talk about is absolute power, where these kings, these monarchs act in ways where they go through this divine right. They explain that they have this divine right. What does divine right mean? Jason?
They have the right to be by God himself.
Yeah, good job, right? So when it comes to their leadership, okay, we're going to talk about Louis the 14th here today. They say that they're chosen by God, right? And if you ever challenge the king, that means you're challenging God. That means you're a heretic. So chances are you get killed. So when it comes down to it, right, religion still plays a huge priority within the people's lives, right? Again, still to this day, obviously religion's huge. It's a big social factor within people's lives. But in this time period, especially, the divine right theory protected a lot of these kings. So the second part of this question, right, divine right really does protect these kings. It puts in the minds that the people can't challenge the authority of these monarchs. Again, we just talked about Henry VIII last chapter here. Right, we mentioned about how he was this divine right ruler. Right, again, he created his own church, separated from the church, the Catholic Church. So with that being said, through this act of supremacy, he was pretty much this religious being, but also, again, this political being. So he was the almighty power in England at this time. So divine right definitely protects these monarchs move through this time. You challenge them, means you're challenging religion, means you're challenging God. So if you do that, chances are you're going to be killed, head put on a pike. All right, anyway, last thing here I want to mention is that throughout this last chapter that we talked about, the age of exploration, the age of discovery, all right, through that Columbian exchange, the triangular trade, this is really creating these European countries into powerhouses, right? They're becoming a lot richer, a lot wealthier. That means their power is going to be a lot stronger, right? We already talked about a war between England and Spain, right? There's going to be more wars here that branch out, that start, because there's going to be a power really struggle, around, not just in Europe, but around the world. So a lot of these countries here in Europe are really growing to become stronger and stronger, thanks to that age of exploration, thanks to this colonization, right? And that term I talked about, mercantilism, the political cartoon I showed you guys, right? Really, that's really what's enhancing these crowns, these monarchs, and for them to hold on to full, strong power. All right. So again, with the terms, we're good there, right? We already went over these. Real quick, I'll put them up for a second. You guys have an idea. Again, with absolutism, we're going to talk about Louis the 14th here today. Okay. All right, divine right theory, we just talked about it. And then the Palace of Versailles. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Palace of Versailles. I'm going to show you guys a video here towards the end of class. And you can see its beauty, you can see its magnificence. Anyway, Avery has some pictures for us then. I'd like to see that. It'd be awesome. I do have a link attached to the video lesson here for today, so you guys can kind of tour the Palace of Versailles yourself. It should be fun. Hopefully, it's not blocked. If it is, I'll have to take it out with Mr. Lisa or Mr. Rudd. Get to them. All right. And hopefully it works for you guys because I think it's interesting. It's pretty neat that you can like walk around the Palace of Versailles, even outside, with the gardens of Versailles, which is amazing to look at. Anyway, with that being said, the Palace of Versailles is going to be the spectacle to look at, where these monarchs like King Louis XIV really expressed his power. But it comes to a drawback, and we'll talk about that drawback here soon when it comes to the people of France not being too particularly happy. Right? They can barely put food on the table. Why? While the monarch lives this really great, grand, awesome life. All right, again, we finished up off with this term here, mercantilism, where these colonies are providing raw materials, resources to the monarchy, to the kingdom, to Europe, these European countries. Right? They're really enhancing their power through the resources they have. Right? So this term is important moving forward. All right, so the age of absolutism. If you have to get a span of years, about 1500 to 1800. Again, last chapter, we talked about a few of these monarchs like Henry VIII. Talked about Bloody Mary, right? We mentioned about Elizabeth I, which that was a little bit of a different monarch, right? Elizabeth I brought on a golden age to England, right? She was a little bit more for the people than many of these monarchs that we talked about and that we're going to talk about here today. So I think that's a good span of years for this time period. There will be a lot of monarchs here moving forward into the 1900s too, right? So to say that it just ends in 1800, it doesn't, right? So if you kind of want to stretch it out, you can. When we get to World War I, this is going to be seen as kind of a transition point, right? These monarchies are going to transition, they're going to change. Some might go to dictatorships, which aren't too much different than an absolute monarchy. But some will embrace democracy, which we'll talk about here soon with the French Revolution and the American Revolution. All right, so the age of absolutism. Okay, one of the really key figures here of this time period that everybody thinks of when you talk about an absolute monarch is Louis XIV. All right, Louis XIV, he's known as the Sun King. Some even call him the Sun God. I know, sounds great, but if you want to put that by his name, please do, either in your vocab, your notes, whatever you want to do. So the Sun King, right? He believed that the sun revolved around him, literally, right? He believed he was this divine right leader, just like we talked about with Henry VIII, that God has chosen him to lead France in a good direction, a positive direction. Anyway, he was one of the longest serving monarchs ever throughout Europe. Okay, so that's something to think about. Elizabeth II, who just passed away not too long ago in England, she was one of the longest serving, right? And Louis XIV is right up there too. So it comes to his leadership, he was in charge for a long, long, long time. So he assumed power right towards the mid 1600s, and he passed away just shortly into the 1700s. But he came to power technically when he was 4 years old. Wow. So you got to imagine that would get to anybody's head, right? So if you're 4 years old and you're a monarch, you're a king, well, obviously you're going to lead in a direction where you're this divine right, you're this powerful person that no one can challenge. Right? Did he assume all his power at 4 years old? No, right? Obviously at that time, people realized that, well, they need someone else to guide them. So they had a cardinal from the Catholic Church guide Louis XIV, try to guide him in a better direction to make decisions for France, right? So again, where did you get all this riches, all this wealth? Well, the age of exploration, right? The age of discovery through colonization, right? France was dominating a lot of these territories, these lands in faraway places. Some parts of Asia, right? When you think about modern day Vietnam, they had access to that. Parts of Indonesia, right? Parts of China even, and which we talked about it, some of that Louisiana territory in the New World. So are they going to butt heads with England here? Yeah, they are. Right? We're going to see the French and Indian War soon, or the 7 Years' War soon. And this will kind of start right underneath his reign. So this is going to cause a lot of tensions for him and his people soon enough. But at first, man, was he living a high life. All right, so anyway, with Louis XIV, the Sun King, the Sun God, he decided to show his wealth in many different ways. One being the Palace of Versailles, which I'm going to talk about next slide. Real quick, he once said, I am the state. Any Star Wars fans in here? What does Palpatine say? What does Palpatine, right? You know, Braden, I know you love Star Wars. I am the Senate, right? So you can kind of see where they took that line, right? I know it's a little bit different, but I think it's interesting how Star Wars kind of looks at history and says, oh, we can put this in here. We can talk about these figures here in these great movies of pop culture and bring it kind of to life here with history and relate it. So anyway, he did say, I am the state, which It's one of those things where it just goes to show his confidence and his power over the people, his ego, right? One thing here too, he controlled the nobility in France. So the nobility, well, these are the nobles, which you kind of can think about early on in this course when we had the feudal system where we were going through that simulation early on. France is a little bit different than England. They didn't really transition, they didn't change as much as what we talked about with England, right? During this time period, especially, right, as this wealth was coming into the country, it did go towards a more absolute direction rather than giving people rights and freedoms. But France, especially, kind of seemed like they're in a past. Anyway, we'll talk about that here soon and how that's really going to change when we get closer towards this French Revolution. People get sick and tired of leaders like this. Anyway, what did he do? Well, he spied on his nobility, right? These people were kind of like second in line. They kind of went around the parts of France to make sure that they were guiding in Louis XIV's direction. Obviously, though, you got to keep them close, right? You got to make sure that they don't try to.
Please excuse the interruption. This is the last call for picture retake day. If you would like retakes, please report to the auditorium at this time.
You got to make sure that they don't try to overthrow your power. So what did he do? Well, he sent spies, which was kind of like a paramilitary, if you think about it. So he sent these paramilitary forces here to spy on his nobility, to make sure that they never plotted against him. Because in all reality, these are the people who were literate. They could read, they could write, they could organize people to maybe go up against a powerful monarch like Louis XIV. So in all reality, he kind of really controlled the people. He spied on these people that had higher positions in the higher nobility. And it was kind of weird, kind of strange, but he would actually invite the higher nobility to the Palace of Versailles for about a week, maybe even a month out of the year. And what he would do is try to distract them, right? As they were trying to bring up policies and ideas of what he can do to try to better control France and even the grievances of the people in France, of all these different areas throughout France. He's like, no. How about we just sit here and play cards, right? So he'd oftentimes play cards with the nobility while they're trying to bring up these problems that were happening. He didn't want to hear about it, right? He just wanted to live this luxury life. So yeah, this control of the nobility, keeping them on a tight leash, right? He wanted to make sure he had assumed all power and make sure that they didn't try to go up against him. So he would invite him over for about a week, maybe even a month out of the year, and play cards with them to distract them. It's like, I don't want to hear about these issues. I don't want to hear about these problems. Let's just party, right? Let's play games. They even go on a lot of hunting trips too, right on the Versailles grounds, which we'll talk about again to try to keep their mind off of things. One thing too, which is kind of odd, is that he would even have his higher nobility dress him every morning. Can you imagine that? And singing lullabies to go to sleep. So this was a way to try to show his power over them. It's like, hey, dress me here. I don't want to get out of bed here. I don't want to break a sweat, so to speak, when it comes to putting on my tights. Oh, geez, gross. But this was a way to show him and the people here his power, right? To belittle the nobility, to make sure that they would never oppose him or rise up against him. All right, what did he do? So as you can see, when it comes to creating a palace like this, which we'll talk about here in the next slide, he had to raise taxes, right? Obviously, the people aren't going to be happy about this, are they? No, right? So they can barely put food on the table while he's living this great grand life, having these massive parties and festivals and balls, right, so to speak, at the Palace of Versailles. All right, again, make sure you guys remember the Sun King, kind of weird, kind of strange, but his bedroom was actually positioned, right, in a part of the palace where the sun, it would rise every day and it would just shine right through his room. Right, so obviously on a cloudy day, maybe not so much, but this was a way for him to kind of really build on this presence of him being the Sun King, the sun god, even, which he called himself, as the light would just shine right in his room and obviously awake him from his slumber. Man, talk about living the high life. All right, so like I mentioned, he was a divine right ruler. So he believed he was chosen by God. And this is a way to try to keep his power above the nobility, but also the people of France. So as he's living this high life, well, he needed to make sure it was protected. So yeah, he'd keep the nobility on a short leash. He made sure that he kept them distracted by having these parties and these festivals and going on hunting expeditions around the Palace of Versailles. But at the same time, too, he used the idea of religion to hold on to his power. So just like the bell ringer here today, it's divine right theory, meaning that, you know what, God has chosen him to lead France. So if you try to challenge him, if you try to oppose him, that means you're challenging God. That means you're opposing God. And heretics, oh, they're not going to be accepted in France. We all know what happens to heretics, right? They either get burned at the stake and they get their heads chopped off and put on spikes to show as an example to the rest of the population. So with this divine right theory, this was a way for Louis XIV to assume power, to control it, and to make sure that the nobility was obedient towards him, that they wouldn't try to go up against him or rise up against him. All right, so again, using religion, right? Keeping the nobility on a tight leash, playing these games and having these great, awesome parties and festivals, going on hunting expeditions, playing cards with them, constantly letting them live at the Palace of Versailles for about a week or about a month out of the year was a way to distract him, but also hold on to his power. And well, throughout his whole life, really no one tried to oppose him. He didn't. All right, we'll talk about the Palace of Versailles, where it was located, right? And that was obviously a key indication too of how he held on to power as well. There we go. All right, so the Palace of Versailles. So look how massive this thing is. Holy cow. Anyway, as Louis was growing in age, right, as he was obviously older than 4 years old when he can make decisions for the country of France, and when the cardinal wasn't needed to help guide him, he decided to build this massive palace at the hunting estate. It used to be a hunting cabin. Holy cow, look at that. That changed over time, huh? This used to be a hunting cabin right outside of Paris, France, right? So Paris, we all know, is the most populated city here in France. So do you think the king wants to be associated with all these people here in Paris? Do you think so? Jason, do you think so? No, right? He's better than that, right? He's higher than all these people here, these peasants that live in Paris. He doesn't want to be associated with what he would call the scum of France. So in other words, he wanted to distance himself, right? And the best place to do it was this hunting cabin that his dad had established right outside of Paris. So Louis XIII had this hunting cabin. So he decided, well, with all this wealth coming into France, thanks to the age of discovery, the age of exploration, he's going to build this massive palace, this massive place where he can live, and obviously the royal family. That just seems a little bit too big for, let's say, one person, but for him, it didn't matter. So with the Palace of Versailles, this is a way for him to distance himself from Paris, right? And the people to make sure that they never, I don't know, find him and kill him. So this was also a way of protection if you think about it. So if he can kind of separate himself from Paris and all the people that live there, he can, well, live this great luxury life and that they don't even have to know about it. Does that make sense? All right, so just distancing yourself a little bit can actually protect you. Is that the signs of a great leader though? No, right? You don't know how the people live. You don't know the grievances that they face every day. You don't know the problems that they face, which a lot of these people here in France were starving to death. A lot of these people were poor. They couldn't even put food on their plate, right? And we'll mention about the costly wars here that Louis XIV gets France involved in, which really drains their finances and causes a lot of turmoil and problems for the people. Anyway, I thought this was interesting. 21 years to build, right? 36,000 workers, about 200 to 300 billion dollars in today's money. That's a lot of money, right? A lot of money. So when you think about it, when it comes to this palace, was it necessary? No, right? Not even close. But for a king, a divine right king, this was necessary, huh? Anyway, with a lot of the features of the Palace of Versailles, with some of the rooms even, you'll see gold embroidered within every single room. You'll see gold even plated on the outside of some of these walls of the Palace of Versailles. And that just goes to show about how much wealth was put into this, how much of the resources that France wanted to put within the Palace of Versailles. Unbelievable. All right, anyway, one of the key features here of the Palace of Versailles is a hall of mirrors, right? So in the hall of mirrors, one thing to note is that mirrors were actually a luxury item. In many cases during this time especially, right, this was even more of a luxury item than gold itself, right? I know what you're thinking, mirrors, really? Well, it was really hard to build and assemble at that time, all right, especially here in the 16, 1700s. The only place you get them was Italy, right, where these artisans were located. So when it comes to mirrors, again, a lot of people didn't have them. And he decided to devote a whole hall filled with these mirrors. Right. Also, you can see the chandeliers. You can see the ornate details here on the wall, right? Embroidered in gold. right? It almost looks like Renaissance artwork. Oh, well, France is trying to kind of bring this Renaissance here, right? Well, Louis the 14th is bringing this Renaissance to France with this building, especially here with this room. You'll see also different types of portraits, paintings detailed here on the ceiling, which I'll give you guys a chance here to look through that walkthrough here shortly of the Palace of Versailles. But anyway, we'll talk about the importance of this room here soon as well. We'll mention about in World War One. I know they had the armistice in that rail car, right, on November 11th, 1918. But when it comes to the official ending of World War One, they're actually going to talk about and discuss the Allied powers, what's going to happen with Germany after the war here in the Hall of Mirrors. So they're actually going to set and establish the reparations that we place on Germany right here in this hall. So I thought that was interesting here. And again, we'll talk about this Palace of Versailles moving forward, and we'll mention about the significance of it when we get closer to World War One as well. But anyway, look at that. Unbelievable. All right. Anyway, with the statues, okay, you can kind of see that here on the left-hand side. The goal here was to try to bring back this Renaissance feel to, right, more of Europe than just Italy, right, to bring it here to France, because France is becoming a strong dominant power at this time. All right. Anyway, like I mentioned with Versailles, okay, for Louis the 14th, his goal is to make sure that the nobility would never outlash against him and never try to oppose him, never ever try to combat against his authority, his power. So what he did, like I mentioned, was to try to keep him there for about a week, maybe even a month out of the year. Play cards, go hunting, dress and even belittle them, make the nobility even feed him to try to show his power and authority over them, so that they would never oppose him, that they would never fight him, go up against him. So what I already talked about already is a divine right leader, right? He believed that he was chosen by God here to lead in France, so that no one could oppose him, right? Also, he distanced himself with the Palace of Versailles, right? He built this thing far, far away from Paris, not too far, but about, I don't know, 90, 100 miles away, right? But he wanted to make sure he was distanced from Paris so that the people would never rise up against his authority. Right. Also, like I mentioned, he tried to belittle the nobility. He tried to distract them, keep their minds off of the actual matters of France when it comes to finances, when it comes to wars and costly issues, when it comes to peasant revolts. He didn't want to hear about it. He just wanted to live this luxury life here in the Palace of Versailles. So in other words, he did a pretty good job at distancing himself. He did a pretty good job of holding on to his power. Again, he did so for about 72 years. He was monarch. So that's unbelievable, kind of unimaginable for someone, especially back then, to live that long. But I guess when you're the sun king, the sun god, life's a little bit different. So anyway, I have a reading for you assignment, which I'm going to post here shortly. This is just a day in the life of Louis the 14th. It's only about a page. There's a few questions, and we can go over that tomorrow. I have it set due for Friday, but we'll discuss it tomorrow then. Real quick, I do want to start off with a video here, though, Palace of Versailles. And then, yeah, if you have, I don't know, some pictures you want to show, that'd be great.